Welcome to the third episode of what's proving to be a fascinating and historically important interview with George Hirsch. George, the emeritus chair of the board of directors of the New York Roadrunners and also distinguished former publisher and current active journalist. And George's active journalism we passed over rather quickly at the end of the last installment. And I just want to start with that because, as well as being a publisher and working with editors like Mark Bloom and Abby Burford, as he told us, George also has always himself been a writer with work, not all the time, but every now and then in the New York Times, and also with work on television. Tell us a bit about that, George. Because you worked as an analyst at Olympics.
Yeah, three.
Tell us about it.
3 Olympics, 84, 88, and 92. So that's Los Angeles, Seoul, and Barcelona were 3. And I've done commentary at various marathons and, Boston, Cincinnati, and San Francisco, and so on. Yeah, and I've always enjoyed being able to supply some expertise and commentary to those events. Back in the 80s, I had a show. It was a segment on ESPN Sports Center, and it was called The Runner's Corner. And I wish, Roger, that we had something like that today. There's just so much good running stuff, and I mean, of course, there's plenty of it online, and Let'sRun.com and Runner's World and on, but what Chris Chavez is doing. But I honestly think it would be fantastic if we had more of that on just even mainstream television today, and I enjoy doing that for sure. I remembered in 88 getting ready for the Seoul Olympics. The Olympic trials were being held out at the New Jersey Waterfront Marathon. And I went out there because I wanted to be, prepared for the Olympics and wanted to follow the Olympic trials and hopefully catch up with the guys who were going to make the team and, all of that. And it didn't quite work out that way.
Well, one thing that a good journalist does, even working as an analyst for television, is you need to know the story. You need to understand the story of the race and help to present that to the listening public, which not everybody can see. You're the expert. You can see what's going on. And you are a storyteller, among other things. And you also have, and I wanted to ask some personal questions in this section, you also have one of running's best romantic stories, which I think you just began.
I did.
So having opened in Fair Verona, let us place our scene. Please carry on. We're now at the New Jersey Waterfront Marathon.
Yeah, you triggered it by talking about my Olympic marathon coverage. So I went out to this relatively small 3,000 plus marathon, but it was being held in conjunction with the men's Olympic trials for the 88 Seoul Olympics. And the day before, there was a typical expo. You and I have been to how many? And we know the routine.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at the Runner's World booth. I was the publisher of Runner's World. And this woman walked by me, and she was someone I couldn't miss. Beautiful blue eyes, dark hair, and we looked at each other. I mean, it was an intense moment, and she kept walking, and I followed her, and I said, "Hi, how are you?" And she said, you're George Hirsch, aren't you?" Which I would have said yes to under any circumstance at that point. And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, you did me a favor, and you don't know this, but a mutual friend had asked you to send a training program. Back in those days, we didn't have online anything. And for someone to ask Runner's World to send a training program for a marathon wasn't an unusual thing. You did. And I remembered the friend request, but I didn't know, who it went to. And she said, you sent me this, and I followed the plan you sent me, and tomorrow I'm running my first marathon. And I said, oh, what are you looking for? And she said, well, like everyone, just to finish. And then she added, but I'd like to come to New York in the fall and see if I could qualify for Boston. I said, so what do you need? And she said, well, I'm 40 years old. I need 340. And I said, how would you like to have dinner with me tonight? And she said, no, I can't. And so I kept talking with her, and I walked her out to her car to keep the conversation going. And anyway, the next morning, you know, I was thinking about her. I have to tell you, I mean, this really made a huge impression on me. And the next morning, I had a business breakfast with the guys who had just organized the Big Sur Marathon, and they wanted Runner's World to get involved. And so I met with them and had breakfast. Went out to the start, and the elites, the guys who were running in the trials, started 15 minutes before the people's race, and off they went. And I went into this sea of people, 3,000 plus. And the chances of finding whom you're looking for. And so, of course, the gun goes off, and I haven't found her. And I waited till every last runner crossed the starting line, and I started jogging. I was, there for a marathon, so I had running shoes on and sweat stuff. And I started looking to my left and to my right, and I kept looking and looking. And finally, at 5 miles into this, there she was up ahead of me. And she was listening to her tunes, running the race. And I came running up alongside of her, Roger, trying to be as cool as absolutely. And I just said, hi. And she was like, what are you doing here? And I said, well, actually, I've been looking for you. And we started to talk and talk and talk, and even life stories. And finally, I remembered it was late in the race. She was doing great. I hadn't run a marathon at that point for a variety of reasons, a broken shoulder and some different things, for more than 4 years. But I had been running, and I remember, it could have been late, 24 miles or something. She said, I'm really getting tired. And we had been chatting. And I said, well, you're supposed to. That's a marathon. And anyway, 3 hours, 37 minutes, and 1 second later, Shay finished the marathon. I had no number, of course. I stepped aside, and she went off. The next morning, I got to my office early. I mean, she knew who I was now, and I knew who she was. My phone rang, and she said, I just want to thank you. I'm qualified for Boston now, and thanks to you. She said, is there any chance I could take you to lunch this weekend? I mean, was there any chance? And anyway, for a variety of reasons, the timing was not quite right. She was moving back to Idaho, where she was from at that point. But the following year, we got married.
Well, I might say, George, of all the people I've met, Shay had a beauty
Yeah,
which was not just external, it was a kind of
exactly,
inner beauty
exactly.
that emanated. She was a very attractive woman in every way.
Yeah,
It was a great privilege to have known her. It
thank
was a
you,
great sadness when she died, just to
thank
let
you.
people know that
Yeah,
that happened. And
yeah,
you know how sympathetic your friends continue to be
yeah.
to
No,
you for that
she's.
loss. But it is a very good story.
Thank you.
Um, a couple of personal things from you, not bad at all. One is that you've always struck me as having a remarkable gift for friendship.
Mm,
You know, I could list your friends, your famous friends, but they're not all just. It's not all Frank and Billy and Joni, who are very close friends
yeah,
of yours. But runners throughout, you make friends quickly, and you seem, as Ambi said in that summary of you, you judge them well and keep them. How important is that to you as part of your running life?
it's really important to me. I would say family and friends I would put absolutely at the top of the list for sure. I had three friends who went to grammar school with me, going back to kindergarten, and I've lost two of them this year.
Hmm.
Luckily, I still have one more, and those are cherished friendships. And I feel, and whenever people hear about our friendship, the four of us, I mean, they say, "Wow, you guys went back to kindergarten and you're still friends," and you know, it's unusual. So I feel very fortunate that's happened, and along the way, in each step I made, you know, in the Navy and here and there, and goodness knows through running, through publishing, um, I've I've added friends, and huge part of my life. Absolutely.
When I was about 18, an older person said to me, "You have to work at your friendships," which was not something that had ever occurred to me before, but it's true. You do, and you keep your friends partly because you work at them.
You do.
And work is not quite the right word, but you make
It isn't.
sure
It
you
isn't.
take initiatives, you reach out, you
That's.
keep
It
you keep
isn't
the
work.
contact.
It's
Yeah.
pleasurable. So I wouldn't use the work word. Some people do it more than others,
Mhm.
and it's true. I have friends who they're really happy when I reach out to them, but they may not be the same doing it themselves. But and I I try to do that. I really find it's so important. It's for my well-being. Yeah.
Well, I've observed that and admire you for it and like you for it.
Thank you.
Uh, you mentioned, just to move on to another point, you mentioned losing your friends, which we are all going to do at this stage of life. And in these interviews, I have deliberately avoided any reference to your age,
Oh,
but it is significant.
it's
Uh,
90.
if
Let's
I know
talk
it's
about
90,
it.
but I personally resist any of the rather patronizing, "Isn't he amazing for 90?" Because I don't buy that at all. I think if someone's
Yeah, I'm
amazing, they're
like
amazing, full stop.
I'm slower, but I'm
And
like you in this
yes, we all
regard.
lose
Yeah,
things,
yeah.
but nevertheless, you're not remarkable just for being old. But you and I and other people who are somewhat public, in the running world especially, are asked often to comment on this, and so
Yeah,
I do write about it a lot, and
yeah.
and 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 you are a model, a role model, if you like, inspiration, whatever word you want, an example. And I think this is very important because running is being a leader in a revolution in our society's concept of aging.
Yeah.
Just tell us your view of it. I feel like, how does it feel? You know, and what comment would you make about being 90 years old?
I'm feeling really good about it. I have to tell you, I feel very, very fortunate. Uh, don't carry the same responsibilities since a little over a year ago I stepped down as chairman, and it suits me just fine. I couldn't be happier. Fitness is a big part of my life. Um, I took a fall year and a half ago, I guess, and fractured a hip. That was no fun, I'll tell you. I was 10 days in the hospital. It was pretty rugged. But I worked hard at it and a lot of physical therapy, and I'm pretty far back. I'm running. I'm certainly mostly on the
So
treadmill.
you're doing some running.
Oh yeah, I'm
This is,
I'm running a lot
this
on
is
the
a year and a half after.
treadmill.
I remember, I mean, you were in a bad shape. It was
I was
on
in
that
bad
time.
shape.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, up until then, I mean, that morning, the morning that I fell, I had taken a nice long run. I was still at it. What I've done more recently, and you're more like me we're old school. Our idea of fitness was running and more running. And now I do much more cross training. I get in the pool a lot. Um, I'm even doing some weights, which I didn't used to do, and push-ups and this kind of stuff. And just recently, Roger, I started boxing classes, and it's been great workout. I mean, no one's hitting me intentionally, but I'm learning, combination punches, and I'm working the big bag and the speed bag, and it's a terrific workout. And the thing about it is it's something new. It's something totally new and different. So I think that's part of this aging. You mentioned friendships, and I think the social aspect of this whole aging is really key. I think there's a loneliness problem that's only getting greater.
Yeah.
And as more people get older and older and into their 80s and 90s and so on. And I think the more people stay in the game actively, socially, aware of things, follow things, the news, whatever it is, politics, sports, the culture, uh, I think that's awfully important.
And finding something where you get a sense of improvement. And your boxing
Yeah.
is doing that for you.
Oh, yeah.
But it's also possible, I find, to have that from running because we're always getting setbacks. I've had broken things, I've had
Sure.
surgeries, and then you come back from that and you get the sense that you
So,
put the work
well,
in
you've been
and
astounding.
you
I
and you
mean,
make
I just,
you make some progress. And that's then aging is not bad at all. It's only bad if everything is diminishing.
and then you
If you're
gotta be,
if
you
it's
gotta
only
be
about losing
You have to
things.
be lucky too.
You have to,
Maybe
of course.
some of this is genetics
Yes.
and some of it's just lucky. I mean,
But some
as
of it
we
is
know,
keeping
people get
going.
cancer and they get other serious ailments, and that's out of your control.
Totally, totally. We're getting towards the end of our time. There's one or two things I wanted to just sum up because they seem to me to be important about you, and I didn't want them to pass unnoticed. You've been obviously remarkable in that nexus between running, in the administration of running, and media, because you've been a publisher and you've done so much to create what I call that sense of significance
Yeah.
by making major publications. Also in your vision for the runner and for runner's world, and also the way you've influenced the New York City Marathon is you have been a major factor in making this sport as inclusive as it is. And it was lucky that it started with people like Ted Corbett and Vince Chiappetta.
And Nina Cusick.
But you've kept that inclusivity. Nobody, it wasn't like the New York club you referred to, where
Yeah,
Jews and blacks were excluded
exactly.
until not all that long ago. They made up for it since. But the inclusivity of running is, I think, one of your achievements. Is that would you see that as? I mean, I don't mean you personally did it all,
I
but you have
understand.
helped to make that happen.
I'm pleased to hear you to suggest that. Let's put it that way. I'm comfortable with that characterization. Yeah.
And the other thing about you, uh, which needs a mention finally, is it's not obligatory on emeritus directors of the board to show up at every race.
Oh,
But you are almost always there.
I love the race.
not
The
necessarily
races.
every race, but go to a race and there you'll be, not seeking attention, but just being there, greeting runners, applauding runners, making friends, hanging out with friends, having your photo taken with friends. And obviously, here you are, a distinguished 90-year-old. You could just cruise on your eminence, but you don't.
Oh,
You're out, and that's one of
I
the things
love
that's
putting
so
people in my tracker at the marathon
it's so endearing
and
about
trying to
running.
catch as many of them as I can at the finish. I mean, it's a real joy, when you're tracking someone and then you can get them right when they finish. And oh, I love that.
Well, I wanted that to be noticed and to pay credit to you for that. It's a remarkable zest that you have, and if that's part of the secret of active aging, well, let people learn from it. So we have enjoyed talking with you, George. It's a remarkable career, and your contribution has been remarkable. One of the things I've written is that, and this sounds inflated, but the big running events like the New York City Marathon are the biggest participant community peaceful events in human history.
Yeah, wonderful.
Which sounds a lot, but of course I've been careful to say peaceful because
No,
obviously
I
wars
understand.
involve more
Yeah.
people, and I've been careful to say participant
Participants, not
because
spectators, sure.
these are not people at a rock concert or the
Or
Super Bowl.
exactly.
That involves more people, but
Sure.
running, they're actually doing it.
Yeah,
They're actually
50,000
out there,
people all doing
and it
it.
is
Yeah.
just amazing. And you're one of the influences, let's just say it like that, who've helped to make this happen because the
Yeah.
story you've told us has taken us from Central Park, where if you saw 2 runners a day, it was crowded, to hundreds of thousands of people trying to, bribe, beg, borrow, do anything to be able to run the New York City Marathon.
Oh my God. You
We
should
won't
see
talk about
you
how
should see
this,
my
we
email.
won't talk about the
Roger,
stories of how
do you
people.
remember me from Miss McGill's 5th grade class?
That I can well believe, and Catherine and I had a rule. People the phone would ring,
Yeah, for sure.
and they'd say, "I wanted you to help us with something," and we'd say, "Well, anything except getting you into the New York Marathon or giving you a bed the night before." Yes, but anyway, this movement, this boom, this whole progress of running from a tiny little group of eccentrics to something which is central, mainstream, healthy, beneficial, wholly constructive for society. You can hardly say a bad thing about it. Part of your achievement, if you look back and watch those people coming over the Verrazzano Bridge and think they're part of your legacy, well, good on you. You've deserved to have that. So I want to thank George Hirsch again. I want to thank Will Sanchez again for his mission and his enlightenment and his generosity in organizing, initiating, hosting these broadcasts. And I want to thank Manhattan Neighborhood Network for providing the hospitality, the skilled production and camera work. And I want particularly to wish well to the group of young people who are working as interns and have been observing this particular program and contributing to it behind the scenes. And I hope that watching 2 old gents talk about a lifetime of running, if it doesn't get any more boring than that, then you'll be lucky. Thank you very much to everyone.